That's actually what's happening because it's microwaves. All the wireless technology was created by Raytheon and the Department of Defense.
Mm.
And when they rolled it out, even when the Russians were saying that people were developing cataracts behind their eyes, they were getting hair loss, dizziness, loss of smell, nausea, brain fog, rapid heart rates. Basically, the Department of Defense said, well, this is part of security, and we just still need it. Meanwhile, in Russia, they were like, well, we're going to do differently. We're going to wire everything and we're going to actually regulate everything and limit it down to one. So, what people don't realize is here in America and Australia and Canada, it's the three they specifically picked, the limits are 10,000. So, you got one over here, you got 10,000 over here. So, we're basically like the long term experiment. What's going on, brother?
Hey, legend, how are you?
Trucking along. It's a 130 degrees over here. So
Okay.
it's pretty darn hot.
Is it really? I have to convert it over here to Celsius. What would that be? We're on the
52 or
Ooh,
55, something like that.
really?
Yeah.
That's that's hot as hell.
Yeah, I got a thermometer and I started checking what the actual temperature is, because Google will tell you it's like 100 degrees. But
Yeah,
when I
right.
put the thermometer outside, I'm seeing over 125. So I was like, that's
That's
one good
hot.
way to lie to people. You tell them the temperature and then it's not really that.
You know what? I talk to this all the time. And the reason being is like my main business is outdoors. And so it's weather dependent. And
Hmm.
all the time. I'm like every day I'm checking the weather to see because if it rains, it's no good for me. I need it to be nice and sunny and dry, right? But our weather is so inconsistent these days as well, with all the chemtrails and everything going on. So, but to your point, you can look at the weather report and the forecast would be, say, for example, this week, sunny every day, partly cloudy on some days, partly sunny on some days, but mostly just zero rain. And then I will go to a customer's place and they will go, man, are we going to get this done this week? Because my forecast said it's going to rain the entire week. So it's like, how are you getting a weather report that's 20 minutes south of where I live that is completely the opposite? And lo and behold, like it'll sort of be overcast, it'll be sort of like look like it's going to rain, and then nothing will happen all day, and then it'll change every single day. That weather report will change to basically fuck your day up. That's what I'm convinced. Like it's gonna ruin your plans, you know?
Yeah, that's why I'm buying a barometer and a temperature or a thermometer that also goes to 200 degrees because I want to see what's actually happening. What's weird is all the thermometers stop at exactly 120. So like I was looking at all these vintage thermometers and they all stop at 120 and that's the peak during the summer. But I'm
Right.
like, it's definitely hotter than this. And it was funny because I put up the video showing how it was hotter than what it actually is, in Arizona, and people are going crazy. They're like, it says it's 88 degrees. I'm like, it's much hotter. And it's funny because I started measuring the temperature and they were saying you need to measure it in the shade, not in the sun. And I'm like, yeah, but when I go hiking, I'm in the sun, right? I'm getting cooked like the whole time. So it's like, this doesn't make any sense. And like you said, how are people getting different forecasts? And you're only 10 to 15 minutes maybe away from each other or whatever it may be. So this manipulation and this mind game, like you said, with the weather and all these things, like right now above me, it's sunny as can be. But if I look straight over there towards the city, it's
Mm.
cloudy as can be. So all this different stuff, and then they manipulate these things, and then the temperature, and then they can say your climate change narrative, the changing of the climates, and it's like, yeah, but it's just because you're not reporting the actual temperature that it actually is. So then you can manipulate and lie to people about, oh, it's getting warmer. And I noticed here, and I think you have cactus by you too as well, but all the cactus and cacti, they look like they get like vacuumed, like they almost get like sucked up. And I started noticing that, and I'm like, well, if it's only 100 degrees, as I'm being told, they shouldn't look like that. But when you start seeing that the thermometer does not go below the 125, mark, I'm starting going, that's probably why now, and we just don't think about it because apps, right? Apps just do it
Yeah.
all for you in your thinking.
Yeah. This whole theme of abdicating your thought process to something else and letting it do all the work is just rife within our society these days. So yeah, I agree. I mean, this was a theme during COVID. It's a theme now. It's the same. The narrative that you see on your computer screen, on your phone, on the TV versus what's actually happening outside when you look up and go, yeah, but look at the clouds or look at the sky because yeah, it's just it it really is a psyop. It really is making people second guess uh, their livelihoods, how they're going about their day. I've typically canceled like a full day of work based on the forecast that I thought it was going to rain all day. And it kind of looked like, Matt, that it was going to rain, but it
Mhm.
just didn't do anything all day. And I kind of lost like so much productivity just waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to get the barometer so I can start looking at the pressure. Because anytime they mess around with this, you can feel it, right? You can feel it in your bones, like your neck hurts and your shoulders hurt and everything else. So I wanted to get a barometer so I could see what's actually taking place to get a better prediction. Because remember when they used to sail the seas, they used to have a barometer and they would
Yeah.
tell when the storms are coming and everything else. So it's like I'm done depending on an app and Google, and Google weather, which, like you said, lies to you. And it's funny too, because like when I look up the weather here, it gives me everything in Celsius. And it's like,
Yeah.
but we record everything in Fahrenheit. So it's like, why are you giving me everything in Celsius? It's like these mind games,
It is.
You're sitting there going, none of these websites work. And none of these things can give you like a 10-day, but then you're also giving it to me in Celsius on top of it. It's like,
Yeah.
what's the point out of this? This is just like funny games to mess with your mind.
Yeah, what is the point? Yeah. Are you finding that your seasons in terms of say produce or like you mentioned the cactus and cacti before, are you seeing that certain flowers are blooming later, earlier, or not at all, or there's certain things like that going on?
I mean, I've put so much copper around my land, and even my neighbors have noticed, right? Like their orange trees look absolutely crazy. There's so
Yeah.
many oranges hanging from the trees that the tree is like hanging down.
Wow.
But as for like the flowers and everything else, I have so much. I have so many bees. I mean, I can look outside right now and we have ironwoods and they're pollinating. There's pollen. They're like pollen balls, and it's 120 degrees outside. So I realized like I don't even I it was funny I was showing agave too, and how agave the stems come up and all these things that happen, and people are like, well, that's when they pass away. I go, we know nothing. Like we know nothing with this realm of like when things are meant to do this and meant to do that. Even when blooming, I've started to think about like with electroculture, I've seen things bloom, 5 or 6 times in a year. Like the
Right.
same flowers come back on even the cactus. I've seen them 2 times a year, which you don't really see that. You see it only once.
Sure.
So all these things I started to think like we know so little of this realm and like what is actually supposed to happen. But over
Mm.
here, it's just toasty. I mean, it's just the traditional toasty. And the internet will give you the fear. But other than that, I mean, I got every animal, every sparrow, every quail. I've got hundreds of little quails that run around over here. They just are drawn, and I feel like the more we uplift that energy, then the more it works like a bubble around you and everywhere else too as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Can you give me more information about the copper that you just mentioned before? Because I know, like in past conversations and a lot of your content, you talk about the copper domes, you talk about how they are conductors of energy, but then with the copper that you just mentioned around your home, I wouldn't mind, yeah, if you can give me some more education on how that works and why.
So I actually started putting a bunch of electroculture antennas all over the place and some hollow copper pipes. And I even took some other copper pipes and bent them like a curve and like
Yeah.
kind of like a U, like a yeah, like kind of like a U. And I put those into the ground and then I surrounded those by quartz. And then I took hollow copper pipes and I put those into the ground and then I surrounded those with quartz. And then I took pieces of wood and wrapped them with copper and made coils and
Hmm.
place those all over the place. And it's funny because all my trees, the growth is like crazy. You see the growth coming off the bottom of the tree and the growth coming off the top of the tree. And and just looking at my neighbors, I can see the difference, like just observing their trees versus my trees and things like that.
Yeah.
Same with the cactus, difference of the cactus when mine bloom, when my neighbors bloom. I've seen that. I've put those next to the cactus. I've even got a brass, like how from usually on your cabinets you have like a brass handle or like a brass orb. It's almost like a little brass ball. I've
Yes.
taken those because when I took those all off the cabinets that we were moving, I took all those and put those in the earth. Because when I was studying everything with electroculture, there was a guy who was using brass orbs to gather atmospheric energy or the ether by just using brass orbs, because he said that the orb pulls in the energy and collects it. And they would use an orb to hold the energy like a
Right.
battery. And you think of the tops of cathedrals, there's orbs, those brass orbs up on top of there with the antennas. So basically, I started thinking, I just mimic that and I just get these couple pieces and put them out and whatever else. And I've noticed it's crazy just the differences. And it's because we don't think of this connection to the ether and the fifth element and the energy that's all around us. But this is what Nikola Tesla talked about. We could have energy that is free, that is all around us, and it's always existing. We've just been taught that the ether is non-existent because Einstein said it's not real, which he was a paid agent. But because of that, we then lost the connection to the earth and the energy. And you can take these antennas, you can put them on ley lines, you can go dowsing and find spots that you want to put, but you just
Mhm.
grid your land. And that's what Slim Sperling talked about with his copper that he was putting into the earth. He was gridding the land to balance everything out. But basically, my setup is I've just put them everywhere. I mean, they're all over the place, gridded into the earth. And I've put orgone pucks. My buddy Mitch has done a lot with orgone. I've put
Mhm.
those all over too as well. But really, it's just funny watching how many times I've seen things blossom, and even like mistletoe by me. I mean, my mistletoe is like the size of a watermelon, and
Wow.
it's just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And people tell you that it's going to hurt the trees, but everything works in synergy, and that's what I realized. And we've been disconnected from that because of the fact that we have a Rockefeller agriculture system that wants pesticides, poisons, and toxins and iron and rust going into your plants. When in
Yeah.
reality, the plants in the earth require copper and copper antennas. So yeah, it's been a journey of learning this, but it's just wild because people come over and they're like, it's so calm here. And it's
Mm.
once you change the energy, everything changes. And you can feel it when you walk on different parts. And even
Yes.
with soil, with digging up the soil, different colors of the soil emit different types of energy. So if you have a red clay, which I know there's tons of red clay over by you, that's a real
Mhm.
powerful energy. And then you have the white sands, that's kind of like the opposite. So it's interesting when you move the sand, which I have done, you move sand from one spot to another, you now actually change the energy from one spot to another. So this
Mm.
is why they do a lot of stuff with the power lines, putting those all over, because they're changing the way that the land is actually moving with the energy. And that's intentional when it comes to it. Same with cell phone towers.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's all interrupting your own field all the time, right? So you it goes back to that agenda of messing your day up with the weather. I mean, it's just like everyone's discombobulated in a sense. They don't know which way to turn because your whole system's kind of messed up.
Well, and I had a lot of people with the bees things, they're like, "Oh, they're taking out all the bees." I've got I don't know how many bees I had. It was so crazy. I was filming them. I was outside just filming them.
Hmm.
There's hundreds of thousands. And even I've had hives fly by me where the whole entire queen flies by and the whole all the bees and everything else. And it's like if we don't take care of our land and spend time with it and actually treat it like it's alive, because Mother Earth is alive, but if we don't treat it that way, then it's also going to go away, right? Like it's going to go try to find, like the bees are going to go find a different place where the energy is better. It's
Yeah.
funny. I go up to this one hiking spot near the lake and it is just thriving like no other. And it's just because it's just left alone. They're not messing with it. They're not putting all the stuff. They're not spraying all the stuff. So it's like we really have to kind of think about that and like how much time is invested into our land. And we need to be connected because the land is living. And so are all the trees, the bees, and the pollinators and everything else.
Yeah, so true. You reminded me before when you're talking about the energy and how calm it is in your surroundings because of how you set things up. When I traveled overseas and I visited some monasteries, some cathedrals, and things like that, you could definitely feel a shift in energy in those areas. But then when you think about their construction, how much copper, how much metals were involved in all of the buildings. It does certainly make sense as to why that would affect your energy levels at that in the presence of all of that, you know?
Well, and they pick selected spots. You look at the Bovis scale. This is something really cool for people to look into. It's a dowsing scale. And they would use the Bovis scale to find out where the best sacred points are of energy. And that was the Bovis scale. And you see all these cathedrals, these mosques, these temples, these areas where the monks are up in Siberia, in Tibet. You find all these spots and the scale is off the charts. And
Hmm.
people walk into those places and they feel at their best also too because of the energy plus the complements of the materials like you just said that are being used. You have
Hmm.
the stones, the quartz, the crystals, the copper, the gold, the brass, the bronze, all of these things. So you have this combination which is enhancing the energy that's below in the earth and then the building materials. And it was interesting too because when they were using the Bovis scale, depending on certain statues that they would stand in front, if it was a very low number, like a 0 to I think it was 100, and that's usually where water knots are as well too. So where the water is kind of like all trying to go different directions, people would
Hmm.
actually get really nauseous and they'd start to get really sick. Like they were feeling like they would stand in front of the statue and they'd almost get ill. So same with water, if you think about it, if we build on a water line, right? Then we start to have health issues. And it's funny because I went around dousing and I was showing people that like the cracks in the asphalt when you're walking, down the street, that's where the water is right there. So imagine you built right on that spot. The concrete below you, that you lay for the slab of the house and everything else, it's also going to start splitting apart because the water will find its way and try to make its way up there and things like that. But yeah, we don't even pay attention to these materials or the energy. But this is what the ancients, you get into, I've been getting a lot into the tribes of Wotan and all these really ancient cultures in these things. And this is what they were connected to. It was only until it was called woo woo, witchery, sorcery, and the Rockefellers told us it was witchcraft, but it's like that's what everybody was doing, right? So it's like you sit there and go, it's only until you made us, seem like we're being, goofballs, I would say. But it's
Yeah.
like everybody was doing this. Everybody was connected to the land. Everybody understood the materials. Everybody stood the energy. And anybody at that time, during those times, they would outcast them, or burn them and call them a witch and whatever. But it's like when you look at it now, the healthiest people are the people who spend the most time in nature, are connected to herbs and connected to the earth,
Yes.
and I can attest to that. My health is the best that it's ever been at 40 years old, being connected to nature when I was not connected and in fake lights and fake everything and whatever else. Yeah, I didn't feel good. So it's like, it's wild how we've been programmed to think this is all, sometimes crazy things, but it's like instinctively, this is just part of our soul. And that's part of us connecting back. And me and you, we've talked so many times with podcasts and things, but it's like each time, the information it's gained, as we've talked and everything else. And then people have gained, and it just keeps doing that. And it's wild watching it how different talking from 2021 when I believe we first talked in 2021 or 2022, to
Yeah.
what it is now talking in 2026 and
Yes.
information.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's encouraging because you see a lot of people adapting a lot of the information and actually applying it to their life and seeing the benefits of just moderate changes in your living and lifestyle that can make a huge difference just to the way you think. And a lot of the way that you think can affect everything. I mean, I think there is certainly a trap that I've fallen into, and a lot of people in this space fall into, is when you go, they're spraying the skies. Everything's affected in terms of the fruit market. It's the lighting. It's the food. It's the mRNA injections in the animals. They're releasing fucking whatever, ticks, wasps, like, all of this shit
Yeah.
everywhere. Like it's almost like everywhere you turn, something's trying to kill you, right? But that thought process in itself is a parasite of sorts. It can actually derail your whole system when you think someone's trying to kill you at every turn. You with me?
Yeah, and that's why I've learned to take it with a grain of salt, because a lot of this stuff is so crazy. Even with the tick thing now,
Mm.
people took all these boosters and injections that they put into their body, which results in alpha gal, the sensitivity and can't eat meat and sickness and all these other things. And then they're like, the tick is going to get me. It's like, but you put all these boosters in your body, which will result in allergies to meat and dairy and things like that. So it's like, why are
Yeah.
you blaming the tick? The tick is just part of nature. It's also been warmer than usual. It's 95 to 100 degrees up on the East Coast. So,
Well,
those ticks and everything, they're going to multiply. That's
yeah.
just what happened. Here in Arizona, we had well, by me actually, it was funny. I had millions of grasshoppers. It looked like I thought it was like the locusts, when the locusts come and they eat everything. But it
Yeah.
was funny because there was a funny quote I read that they said that like grasshoppers, even though they'll come like in millions at a time, they'll eat all the food and it'll actually take them out because now they got no food. So like
God.
nature has this perfect harmony and balance, and we have to have that too, because we have to have discernment where yes, there are hybrid ticks. They took a tick from North America and they mated it with a Southern American tick, and now it's just a different tick. But
Mm.
nature, after about two or three times of having babies, will actually just balance it out again. Same with the mosquitoes, Bill Gates mosquitoes, people are freaking out about that. Northern American mosquito mixed with a Southern American mosquito makes a hybrid mosquito, but nature balances out, and I think that people have to go, well, okay, what can I do then to get rid of these mosquitoes, right? Well, stop taking out the bats. You keep spraying all the stuff to kill the mosquitoes, and then you
Yeah.
took out the bats, and then you're like, we can't figure out why we got so many mosquitoes. It's like, just let's take it back and look at nature and go, something's missing. Same with the ticks. You
Yeah.
just get some chickens. The chickens and will eat up all the anything that's pretty much on the ground. So like you said, signing on to social media is crazy nowadays. Like it's absolutely madness. It's everything's going to take me out, and it's like in reality, we're all still here, and we really should kind of think that through all of this fear propaganda and
Mm.
all the other things and the towers and the chemtrails and all the other garbage and whatever else, we're all still standing, right? Like if you really think about it, we're pretty powerful when you think about how much stuff, like to say that we're even still here after all of the things that have taken place. We are
Yes.
powerful. And I think that that has to be, ingrained back into our mind because we're letting these devices, these black mirrors, control the mind. And that's not the way to move forward in society, especially in the age of information, which we have so much information. You can figure out anything you want nowadays, and then
Mm.
still sit there and be like, no, I can't go out in nature because the ticks are going to get me. I'm like, dude, just go out, go hiking. You're meant to do that. That's what they want. A
That's it.
15-minute city, and you're feeding the program,
Yeah.
And I got a video coming out on Alpha Gal tomorrow because it's crazy how much just this propaganda and that one, especially like the tick one and the bio lab and Plum Island, and all the stories that have been sold, they built that one up. That's been building for like six, I think 50 years with the CIA and MK Ultra
Really?
telling
Oh,
that
wow.
people are ticks are going to get them. But it's like you've been taking all the boosters with gelatin in them, which makes you allergic to animal products.
Got
So
it.
it's like we don't see that, but we see this because it's flashed on the news. And
Mm.
now instead of having news, you have social media news.
Yeah.
So yeah, even with my page, I've tried to do my best to still keep just education, awareness, and solutions because it's too much. You sign on, and every day I'm like, dude, this is probably fake. This is the other thing too, is like a lot of this stuff might not even be happening, right? I could film right down the
Agreed.
street and set a little fire, and you're like, the whole town's on fire. And it's like, no, I just set the fire, you know? So we really have to think that too, right? Like we can't let this device, which is trying to dictate our reality, like Mark Zuckerberg would love to have, to do to us and things like that. But we can use discernment, and we should. And sometimes disconnecting, spending a lot of time in nature and putting your feet in the ground, you kind of sign back on, and you're like, nah, I'm good,
Yeah.
and that I think is the most important part, to say, it's good to go on here. What are you scrolling for? What are you looking for, right? If you
Yeah.
find Adrian's podcast and you look at it, what are you looking to learn? But do you have to sit and watch, I'm going to say 750 of Adrian's videos until maybe you go bananas, right? Because then you will sooner or later. So it's
Yes.
like we really should be using this as a learning tool rather than something to just, jack into our psyche like MK Ultra.
Agreed. I mean, it's almost like that depiction of a movie where someone downloads like all of the information all at once, and they're flipping out. They can't like handle all the information because it's too much to process it at any one time, and their body starts to just like wreak havoc, right? And I think it's the same. I think you can go down these educational paths, which sound sweet and sort of enticing at the beginning, but then, 6 hours later, you've got no pants on, and you're you're deep into the abyss of whatever internet rabbit hole you went down, and it's soul destroying. I think like you can't beat human connection. You can't beat being in nature, next to water, out in the sun, around plants and animals, and good human beings that you can have a great conversation with, touch, feel, kiss, make love, enjoy, like laugh, like all of that sort of thing is that's all energy, right? So yeah, I totally agree. Can we circle back just quickly? You mentioned um that Einstein's an agent. Can you elaborate?
So Einstein was put in by the Rockefellers to get somebody to debunk the ether. So you have the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds who own the entire education system throughout the entire world. Someone says I study at a school in this country, it's the same thing that you learn in the other countries. You can see it now today in all the countries where the schooling system is working. But the Rockefellers and Rothschilds have owned the education system for a long time. During the 1889, there was, I believe it was the Morley, I think it's a Morley experiment, which was debunking the ether. That was the first step. And then secondly, they brought in Einstein, who Einstein was a USPS worker, which is funny. He was a post office worker. And I'm not insulting post office workers, but the fact that this guy became the super genius of all of this, and they said all these things and da da da, what they do is they put these people in, and then these people become very popular. And so he was funded so that he could go against the ether. And what happens is when you get rid of the ether after the 1920s, you call it now quantum. That's what people know this as. They're like quantum theory and this and blah, blah, blah. But once you remove the ether, you also remove the pretty much the spirit aspect of everything. And this is what Steiner talked about, that there's the fifth element, the spirit aspect of everything. We didn't just, there wasn't just an explosion and we came from nothing and everything else. There's all this beautiful, intricate energy that is taking place. There's gases, there's all these materials, there's all these things. And so what happens is it moves us into the materialistic viewpoint that everything must be exactly this. It cannot happen any other way. And so Einstein was put in there to debunk the ether. And around the time that he was put in there to debunk the ether, which was 1920s, around that time, and he said on his deathbed that the ether was there. But around the time of the 1920s, where he was put there, electroculture and all of these spiritual teachings, Rudolf Steiner, all of this connecting to the ether, that was at its peak point. People were understanding that there's this energy that's all around us and we can tap into that. And there's all these scientists, there's so many, it's crazy. I'm putting them all into my book.
Mhm.
But all these people who understood the ether, they could pull energy out of the air. Henry T. Murray was pulling 50 kilowatts out of the air using a stone and a mini box. And
Wow.
the stone it relates to radium. It's germanium and radium. And he would dope the stones with radium. Radium is a collector of electricity. It pulls electricity out of the air. This is where your nuclear power plants come from. They're pulling energy out of the air. They're steam plants. So you have this energy that gets pulled out. But if you now debunk all of this, right, and you get rid of atmospheric energy in the ether and things like that, now you have this society which has to depend on petroleum. And that's the only way. And you only think like, well, we can only get, we need heat to do something. Well, this is where you get into like cold electricity, which is another form of electricity because when you have heat, then you constantly heat things up. You're burning, you're inefficient. The average engine only runs at about 10% of what it can actually do. Victor Schauberger said this in the 1930s. The average car engine is only running at 10% of what we are meant to have. And so when you get rid of this etheric element, you now can move people into this very like basic, inefficient, and ineffective, I would say, technology. And that's what we still have today. We still got power lines. We still got, low gas mileage. We still got all these things. And it's all because we moved away from that. And it was really fascinating because Nikola Tesla created a car which ran on the ether, which is just the energy coming out of the earth. So that's why when you have somebody like that, they can disrupt the whole system and they can keep people on the track of buying the technology that you want to sell them, which is petroleum based. Everything in your house petroleum, we got you, and then they bought up everything else in the meantime and then monopolized it on top of that.
Yeah, wow. That conveniently leads into food, medicine, and everything else that you can control the human species with, right?
Yes, because then you also take the energy out of that, right? You don't believe that your water has any energy anymore. You don't believe that your food is connected to the ether. You don't believe that saying positive things is going to impact your food and bring on a better dish for you and your body. So
Hmm.
you now become where, well, this is just a material, right? This is just plastic or it's copper, but I'm just using that as an example. You start looking at things in a deadening fashion and you've now lost that etheric connection and that
Mm.
connection to the food, the water, to your clothes, everything that you're wearing. There's a material, there's a resonance. This is linen that I'm wearing. There's a material, there's a resonance, there's light that is all connected. The waves, Walter Russell talked about this. So you
Hmm.
lose all of these things, and all of that's woo woo, right? We're right back to that woo woo, witchery, whatever else. And it's like, no, because when you start to look at life, it moves in waves. You look
Mm.
at the ocean waves, you see those. You see an earthquake, you see waves in the earth. You see storms, they move in waves. Everything's moving in waves, even these trees spiraling in front of me. So we start to lose that connection because now we think, well, everything should just be like a straight line, and that's just be just like this and just like this. But in reality, it's like that doesn't work that way. And this is why when you get into like why we never went to the moon, right? You're
Mm.
trying to shoot up this technology with like a billion gallons of gasoline, and then you wonder why it ends up in the ocean because
Yeah.
it does not go, things do not just move straight. They spiral. There's a vortex that takes place. And it was funny too, because Schauberger in the 1940s, he created the first flying saucer that was created. That was the Germans who made the first flying saucer. First nuclear power plant, Germans. You find all the technology we have was stolen after World War II, but once again, they still studied the ether. They studied the principles of Steiner. They studied all of these things. But when you eliminate it from our teachings, right, through all the different other countries, well, now you wonder why your technology has not advanced. And that's kind of where we are today. But the cool news is because of doing these talks and talking about these things, it's actually bringing all of this back. And it was funny because there was a lady who put up a lecture culture video, Gubba Homestead, and she got like 40 million views. And I thought, that's nuts, right? Like that's how much things have changed. Where, I put up videos and they hit about a million. But 40 million is just that's the minds opening, and we just can't see it because the news muppets would never say anybody's doing this. But the minds are just opening on a regular basis, and that's the change. And it's only going to continue because the newer generations who are growing up, I had 10-year-olds talk to me about electroculture. The questions they asked me blew my mind because they are asking me the most advanced questions I could ever imagine. So, and
That's
that's
great.
a new generation coming up. So it's there's a there This is why this AI push, we think for you type of thing is being pushed because the new generations rolling up is on a whole nother level. And that's where that's a threat to this goofy system that's, totally broken, which, we know that.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, look, there's so many things that are designed to make you almost create a cutting point in your level of thinking. It's like I'm starting to think or question a particular narrative or whatever it may be, but there's something to cut you off at that. Oh, don't think too much, because it's not true. And then it kind of just stifles your brain. It's almost like a short circuit is probably the best way to put it. But I mean, look, you mentioned the moon. That's an interesting thing to explore. And I know with my kids, a lot of information. I don't know if it's a result of my thinking and the things that I say, but a lot of the moon fake landing, flat Earth, um, anything around vaccines, around manipulation of like media technology, all those sorts of things are creeping into their algorithm, which is good and also bad in a sense because it does loop you back to, like you said, the black mirror that kind of ties you into the vortex of nothingness.
Yeah.
But at the
Yeah.
same time, there's information that's peering out and or seeping through enough to kind of make them think just a little bit deeply about what's going on. And I agree, like my kids are 19, 16, and 14, right? So, but they are saying things, and I can tell with the ones that are more connected to themselves that this it's almost like they have a intuition. They've not, I mean, everyone has an intuition, but they recognize that they can tap into it. They can kind of like um have a more connection to their feelings, maybe even anticipate and connect to things that would happen in the future, but they thought it first. Does that make sense? Like it's not like, oh, I thought of Matt and then he texted me or he rang. It's kind of like I had a vision of everything playing out of as to what this person was going to say, and then they said exactly that, and they're saying these things to me, which is super encouraging. But I think that is it's a force that our younger generation have, but I don't completely agree that there. Well, I agree that a there's something that's trying to disrupt that, with the AI, with the VR goggles, and just the virtual reality type of thing. Does that make sense?
That's 100%. I mean, because think about that. I mean, those kids are now having the skills and they're already being in tune with things. They're seeing things and they're already pretty much, I don't know, 10 steps ahead of all the other generations, which maybe that never happened.
Yeah.
Like I mean, growing up, I used to be able to see a lot of stuff and then it all one day went away. So it's like, well, why did it go away? And then you think of the food and you think of all the stuff and everything else. And it's like, well, now they're being exposed differently, right? They're eating organic, they have pasture raised, there's a different way of growing, no fluoride, all these beautiful things. And it's like you also look at this with the technology, like you just said, with between the AI and the smart technology, the watches, the AirPods, all of that too. That's all to slow that down. Because I've
Mm,
started to realize like all of this stuff being given, right? Because it's being given, it's like a consent thing, but being given to the person is to really turn off their natural abilities. And the
agreed.
more we kind of go back into the olden ways, because even with myself, I've noticed just being able to be tuned in more and much more. And like you said, instinctively be able to predict
Mm,
things or see it in advance or have a dream. And that's exactly what happens or say something. And that's exactly what happens. But
mm,
if we're programmed upon birth, which is what our many generations have been before, I would say the advent of the internet, because it can actually break that. But if you're programmed upon that, it's very hard to break. And that's why, like a lot of people who grew up just newspaper, radio, television, right? When you're trying to maybe explain something different, if you haven't seen any other forms of information because you've only been seeing that, it's really, really hard. But there's people who have grown up that way and now they have a phone and now they're seeing things different. So,
yeah.
it's pretty wild how much things can change very quickly because the information is so fast. But
Mm,
yes, I do think that that's why they're trying to push like these virtual, lands and kids and games and all kinds of stuff, like to really get them away because I'm sure they know timelines and I'm sure they know how things kind of change with the earth and all the alignments and things, and they're trying to slow that down.
Yeah.
Because even like I was saying with those 10-year-olds with the electroculture, these kids, I was like, these are like Nikola Teslas, right? Like this is like a whole group of them. And I thought the questions and everything and how they're understanding it and getting it, these kids are going to be changing a whole bunch of stuff. Now, if you have hundreds of them or thousands, I thought, you now
Yeah.
have a militia of people
Yes.
who can change things, right? And that's a huge threat to this system, which tries to keep people like, in the Coliseum and the stadium, just, believe in the narrative. So
Yeah.
there is a breaking point, and I'm sure they know because these people we're dealing with, these Rothschilds and Bowers and Oppenheimers and these people because they've been for a long time doing what they're doing. They
Mhm.
also know when revolutions come because they plan these things. They push, they cause the wars and do these things. So I'm sure they've seen these playbooks where, oh wait, a lot of people are getting into copper and electroculture. Oh well, we
Yeah.
got to get some influencers out there on HGTV start blocking that up,
Yeah.
sucking and paying them and being like, yeah, don't be doing any of that. So I saw
Yeah.
that, and I used to laugh about that. I'm like, the Home Gardening Network is trying to debunk my videos, it's just so I laugh with it now because it's just so goofy. But that's the thing too. They don't want us to laugh. They want us to be so, whatever and angry and in this emotional state. And I've learned not going to be in that, and the information is going to get out whether you try to stop it or not, because it's going to get shared somewhere on one of these platforms. And good luck trying to block that.
Yeah, I agree. Man, I'm seeing Matt kids on Instagram bending spoons with their minds, moving objects, without touching them. Like, there's kids out there that are just tapping into shit that's just, it is literally what you would be burned at the stake for 100 years ago. Like they're tapping into something that I think innately we all have, but I mean they have it as a gift that's um I guess unfucked with, to begin with. But I agree through vaccines, through all the sorts of things that are contaminating our minds and our bodies and our spirits is certainly affecting us, and it's concerning because like I know when I first talked to you, it probably was back in 21 or so, and we were talking about um, the pandemic and about the virus, and everyone's sort of complaining about this flu-like thing that's going around. But you were one of the first people that mentioned to me about radiation and all the cell towers going up and everything sort of affecting your your body in that way, which is causing certain types of viral loads to kind of come out of your body and spew out of your body. I'm butchering everything that you said, but I wouldn't mind talking to that because that's something that at the moment I'm super, I guess, aware of because in this space that I work in, like I said, my main bread and butter is outside, and that's been that way for 3 years since I had to close my last business down. I went into an outdoors business, right? So I'm copping sun all day. Like I'm in the sun for 6 to 8 hours, 5 days a week, right? So I'm getting all the goodness of being outside, but at the same time, I come into, this little, house studio and I'm surrounded by internet cables and Wi-Fi and fucking, lights pinging everywhere. It's a concern. And I think at the moment there seems to be a ramping up of this sort of radiation, which I sense and I feel like in a sort of visceral level. I don't know if you could probably relate to that, but when I'm in certain environments, I can kind of feel like, things are firing off at a million miles an hour and they're affecting the way that I think, feel, and act.
So yeah, that's actually what's happening because it's microwaves. All the wireless technology was created by Raytheon and the Department of Defense.
Mm.
And when they rolled it out, even when the Russians were saying that people were developing cataracts behind their eyes, they were getting hair loss, dizziness, loss of smell, nausea, brain fog, rapid heart rates. They couldn't relax, all these things like you just said. Basically, the Department of Defense said, well, this is part of security and we just still need it. Meanwhile, in Russia, they were like, well, we're going to do differently. We're going to wire everything and we're going to actually regulate everything and limit it down to one. So what people don't realize is here in America and Australia and Canada, it's the three they specifically picked, the limits are 10,000. So you got one over here, you got 10,000 over here. So we're basically like the long-term experiment. But yeah, I started talking about how people were getting radio wave sickness in 2020 and 2021 with Operation Warp Speed, which was the rollout of 5G. And what was happening is 5G was being installed in nursing homes. It was on cruise ships. It was in the hospitals. It was in all the places that people are like, well, we're having all these, breakouts that they were saying and whatever. Then they started rolling it out to the cities. Arizona was one of the first places too that decided to roll all this out without telling people because I actually fell ill in 2019 from the building I was living in that rolled this stuff out. I didn't know what was going on, but I started getting like ill. And then they started putting it all over the place. And then they started upgrading people's phones. And now, about a month ago, you had the whole like Santa virus. They just make up words of whatever it is, Santa, Hanta, Fanta, whatever. And, that was the showing on a cruise ship again. And they were talking about how the cruise ships were rolling out 6G. So you have this whole thing where, these viruses are allegedly jumping all over. But what people aren't seeing is the technology is actually being implemented in these places causing radio wave sickness. And back in 1919, when they first rolled out the radio, there was the Kansas flu of 1919, and they called it the Spanish flu, for propaganda purposes. But it was the Kansas flu of 1919, and all these people started getting sick from the radio. And what they say, you need to wear masks, you need to get in your house, and then you need to take our boosters and our injections. And it's the same playbook. And they jailed people and said, you need to go do this. So, what if people aren't paying attention to is all this wireless stuff, like you said. When you enter into a city and you bring a meter, the thing goes off the charts because there's antennas, there's towers, there's all these things. And those
Yeah.
microwaves will mess with your mind, mess with your body. So, like my place is all hardwired. I have an Ethernet cord right here. There's no Wi-Fi, there's no Bluetooth, there's no Alexa, there's no smart meters, there's no nothing. There's no wireless in my whole entire house. Even my
Mhm.
phones, I've hardwired those as well too. And that
Wow.
is part of how we heal because we don't need to have this wireless technology. It's being sold to you so that you slowly get rid of the wires, right? You just put the headphones in, you have your phone, it gets access anywhere. Some places you don't even need it. But what happens is those microwaves are messing with your body. And
Mm.
Raytheon created the microwave, and then Raytheon created the wireless technology. So, you heard a lot during the pandemic, this is getting you, and snake venom is getting you, and viruses, and just whatever, a bunch of whole nonsense. Because what happens is we're neglecting the antenna, like you said, because we've been programmed from the antenna and cell phone tower, which went up in front of your house, and the upgrade on your phone. And the
Mm.
perfect example of this is Wuhan, because that's where it all started. The bats, they tell us like a bio lab, and they just make up words. But the bats, are dropping droppings and then giving it to the Wuhan people. Well, Wuhan was the first place with 5G. And that is
Mm.
why they showed videos of like older gentlemen falling over, having lung issues and things like that. Anytime they've ever upgraded technology, there has resulted in a pandemic. That's it. Like it's just that simple. You look at every single time, even 1976 with the swine flu, same exact thing. They upgrade these things, people get sick. But the cool part is you don't have to have any of this stuff, right? You can just wire your internet, you can hardwire things, you can switch to incandescents, you can do all of these things, but it comes down to your choice. And as these things crank up, because we hit the 5G right now, right? And you saw people, they got sick, a lot of them passed all kinds of things. They moved to 6G and all this other nonsense that they have with drones, because that's how they're going to move their drones and their robots. You're going to see it again, right? So it's important to be just hardwiring your place and taking care of it because when the wireless frequencies are also in your house, they crank those up. There was a building over here and there was a internet company who had a building, a little box next to the building, and they called it the Beast Box. And I said, "What is that?" Right? Because he's like telling me about it. He's like, "Yeah, we crank it up when it's needed." And I'm like, you crank it up? What does that mean? He goes, yeah, sometimes people don't have enough service, so like we crank it up. And I thought, oh, okay. So every wireless node, right? Every router, every modem, every phone, every everything else can be cranked up with that box. And then that whole complex gets cranked up. And you could do that around the full moon. You could do that at all different times. So you can cause sickness to an area, right? And they wouldn't know why they're getting ill. And that is where radio wave sickness comes in because what radio wave sickness is microwave radiation causing illness. And it was taken off the medical books in the 1920s with the Rockefellers because they were like, how are we going to sell radios? So what they did was they took that off the books and then they started calling it something else. They're like, you got influenza, you got chronic fatigue, you've got this, you've got, autoimmune.
Mm.
Well, actually, you're just being poisoned by the wireless technology, and they've just given it thousands of different names. So when I talked about all that and just saying this again with you as well too, that was heavily censored. That is the most censored topic I've ever seen on social media is
Wow.
anything related to wireless technology because it competes with AI, the Zuckerberg plans, these little glasses. I see people, they got these like silent headphones and they're doing yoga. They're
Yeah.
radiating their heads. They're all going to come down with tumors in their heads. Fitness
Yeah.
people, health influencers, they got wireless headphones. I'm like, are you what? How can you be
Mm.
healthy? Right? Like that's the opposite. So, you have to see that they know what happens in years from now, and it's just they play the long game. So if you can prevent it now, which is one step to get rid of all your wireless technology, takes about 20 minutes. That is a great thing that you can do, and you will be happy for yourself and be healthy. The other
Mm.
alternative, too, because there is one more, is sitting in hot springs. Hot springs water or radium water is the counter to all EMF because you have EMF, which is non ionizing, and you have radium hot springs, which is ionizing. So that's
Wow.
the counter to this whole EMF situation. The sun is also ionizing, but what they're doing right now is changing all the color spectrums and blocking all of that. So what happens is your body gets a little weaker and you got all this wireless technology. So these hot springs over here can actually still be a great solution. So I wanted to leave with that rather than, the chaos, the chaos of all these things and also to raw eggs as well. Because raw eggs, the yellow in there, the sulfur, the radium in
Good.
those eggs, that's another really simple one, and people can just chug them like Rocky.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I can see you cooking over there, man. They must be really, really hot. You're
It's toasty, yeah. It's. I'm a little hot, but I'm fine. I mean, I'm so used to like whatever. I'm so used to being hot and whatever else, so it's not a big deal.
okay, no worries.
My shirt is slowly becoming a different color blue. It's so funny.
That's why I mentioned that.
It's all
Like
good.
melting. That's good, man. All right, well, look, let's switch gears a little bit. We will talk to a lot of solutions and stuff like that because I think it's important for people to know exactly what they can do in order to improve their health. I mean, anyone that wants to go and watch your channel, I mean, I think lately you've come under a lot of fire of late, and you mentioned just a minute ago about all these healthy people, but they're doing seemingly like unhealthy things, as in, um, like even just say wearable technology. Everyone wants to track every fucking thing that they do, and they've got a ring on their finger, and they've got a Fitbit watch, and they've got something else, and they're just like, I can't see why they don't see that the earbuds, like everything else, is just like pinging off everything, and all of their like phones are just like that's a node to another phone, and that's a node to another phone, and it's pinging off your Wi-Fi, and then all of a sudden you're just in this web of laser beams, and microwaves that are just eating you alive. So yeah, I think the health industry has been certainly co-opted, and it's sexy, in terms of peptides and all of that kind of stuff, and the GLP-1s and all the rest of it. I think, I certainly have been lured into it. I mean, I've been lifting weights since I was like 13. So, getting into all of that kind of stuff, there's certain elements of that I find sexy and appealing. But at the same time, it seems to have one clear agenda, and that is to mess your body up, and mess your mind up. So you can't operate at 100% because you're just always your body's always fighting.
Well, and I like that you said that because somebody might say, well, I don't see that it affects me, and you can see people rapidly aging. I know people who are 10 years younger than me and they look 20 to 30 years older than myself, and so you can see that that's causing that aging that's messing with their body. And then
Mm.
also maybe their memory, right? I talk to a lot of people. How good is your memory? This is a muscle right here too,
Yeah.
and what happens is with all this, like you said, this wireless technology, it's cooking the mind and then cooking your memory. And,
Mm.
that's another thing I've seen where people are just, they don't remember things. They say something and they forgot it, 2 seconds later. So, all this technology, yeah, they want to track things and put peptides, which I found out all the peptide companies, you find the vaccine companies who make them. You find BARDA, people can look this up, BARDA. It's called BARDA. It's the opposite of DARPA. It's the biological version of DARPA. They
Yeah.
make those. You got Pfizer. You find Bill Gates, Bill and Melinda Gates, the same thing. And I put up a whole thing about that because I was like, people are putting this in their body and they're giving themselves boosters. They're giving themselves exactly what these companies want to give. And then same with, like you said, the AirPods and this wireless tech, same
Mm.
thing. You're cooking all these parts, and guess what? You're going to come down with an illness and you're right back into that system. And that's why I've learned like we don't have to use these systems. Maybe if your leg gets, I don't know, you lose it and you need to put it back together. But other than that, like we can just be healthy without it. And all this tracking and tracing, where's the data going? Right? You
Mm.
got the ring on the little thing, and then you got the watch, and then you got this, and you track, and you tell me how many hours you sleep. Who cares? Honestly, I don't even, I just wake up. I'm here. I'm present. That's what we need to be. So it's like they're turning you into robots, and you don't even see
Don't
that
even
you're
know
being
it.
turned into a robot because
Yeah.
you're doing things that don't make any sense. If
Mm.
you say, I've only slept 8 hours or 7 hours these last couple of weeks, maybe you're just stressed, right?
Yeah.
But like now you're going to analyze this data. This is the same as blood work. They're like, your blood work is this. It's like, well, I didn't eat yet. Now my
Mm.
blood work's going to be different. So you can manipulate all these things when you start getting so technical. And what I've learned just being in nature is there's really nothing technical. It's actually just really simple. You just look at it and that's pretty much what it is. There might be some little epiphanies that you might have and things like that, but that's the programming, right? You're getting people into all this like these words and jargon. And then I've seen too with fancy words. No, this is just simple. Let's just keep it simple. We don't need 10,000 terms of something. Because what happens is you have 10,000 terms, you have 10,000 illnesses, you have 10,000 this, right? And then the person is confused. Versus if we just say these make you sick and you should be in nature and you don't need to put things and inject them into your neck and your body and everything else, that's it. It's just a simple way of living. And that's just my thing. Maybe I get under a lot of heat for it for talking about it, but I actually, at this point, I'd rather people learn the truth than be a guinea pig.
Yeah.
And God forbid, what happens with especially the peptide push thing with the
Mm.
Ozempic, people's bones were breaking in half and all kinds of things. There's going to be some real weird stuff because this is kind of like when HGH, if you remember, became real popular. And then
Mm.
all these people started getting all types of tumors and growths and weird stuff because they were like, oh, yeah, by the way, all your cells grow. Your teeth start spacing apart and things like this.
Gums grow.
So,
And
you
all
you don't you don't know what you're involved in. And I'm just going to say it that way, right? You kind of should look at the money and look up who produces things. And then you kind of find always BlackRock, Vanguard, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, pharmaceuticals. It's like it's the same pattern every time.
Yeah. And it's the same disconnect from yourself and nature. So that's evidence in itself. Okay, so what do you I know with supplements like I have a feeling that you would think the same way as me that a lot of the supplements, 99% of them are synthetic. I mean, you think you're taking vitamin D, vitamin C, you think you're smashing creatine like it's going out of style, but at the end of the day, these are basically pharmaceutical products that are derived from pretty nasty shit, and you're putting that poison back in your body. However, in saying that, you do promote some products and some supplements. So what would be your top five, top 10 that are kind of like game changers in how you think and how you feel, clearing out your mind, getting that cognitive function back again, making sure that you can actually like think constructively about your life and about your surroundings.
So if we hit on that one first, before I say this, it says you have 40 seconds left. I don't know if that matters.
Well, I don't know.
Okay,
I've
I'm
got,
just wondering because I didn't want it to clock down and me just disappear. So
yeah,
that's why
I
I was
don't
going to
know.
say that.
I thought I was
So
on the
maybe.
unlimited plan.
Oh,
Yeah,
it says 30. Let me see what this is. Hold on, let me just click
let's
it.
see what happens.
Scheduled meeting time is almost over.
Yeah, right.
Time remaining. Oh, maybe it only, okay. Let me just let it count down before I
Yeah, yeah,
even
yeah,
say
yeah.
anything because I don't want it to disconnect us for whatever reason.
Let's see what happens.
6 seconds. We'll see.
Okay.
How goofy. I was like, why is this thing? I saw this thing.
I don't know. It's never happened
Okay, so
before.
that I guess didn't make a difference. All right. Here you go, right?
It's
You're
the
counting
Y2K.
down and you're giving me a minute to talk and whatever. So I'm sitting here going like, now it's going to kick us out because our technology is controlling us. But on that topic, the thing with you said with the I'm sorry, with the vitamins and the creatine and these synthetic things,
Mm,
this is where you find the Rockefellers and Big Pharma, and you find the government. You actually find all three. So the Rockefellers and Big Pharma were the first ones to create vitamins. They created synthetic yeast. It was by Casimir Funk, I believe it was called. That was his name, and he created the first synthetic yeast, and that was known as the first B vitamins that people could consume. And I think they still sell it on the shelf. It's like a little it's like a yellow yeast that's like in a
mhm.
container, and they say it's good for your B vitamins. So they've been selling that now for over, I think, 120 years. And
Wow.
then when you find vitamin C, you find Pfizer. When you find vitamin B12, you find Pfizer. And you find all these different pharmaceutical companies, which were all involved in making these vitamins. And that's why in the book Murder by Injection by Eustace Mullins, they never went after vitamins. Like they went after people selling herbs, but they
Mhm.
never went after people selling vitamins. The vitamin stores always stayed in business. But during the 1960s, if you sold herbs, they would come to your house with a SWAT team and kick in your door and take those herbs away. And that's the thing. My whole thing is stick to food. If it comes from a food, if it comes from an herb, if it comes from something like that, we bring it into our body. And that's actually what Cultivate Elevate's been. Mushrooms, shilajit, dragon's blood, pearl. If it comes from food, we put it into our body. If it's made in a petri dish, I'm not putting it in my body.
Yeah.
And then you've seen this with all these different, the creatine. Like creatine is two ingredients, which is salt. That's actually where it comes from. And it's just salt. So you got $40 salt. You could eat sea salt instead. And creatine came about because they wanted people to get away from animal products. And that's the other thing. When you look at supplements, you get proteins. I was in the fitness world, I've seen it all. You get into the proteins and all the stuff that they were sold, you're not eating real meat. I
Yeah.
told people in 2015 to eat grass-fed meat, and people looked at me like I had three heads. And I'm
Right.
like, that's what you're meant to eat. And he's like, but I drink protein. I'm like, you're not even eating real food. You're eating powder. So all of this is a part of that, like getting you ready for that, like the lab made food, right? Because you've moved from now the vitamins, then you move to the peptides, then you move to, this stage and then you get lab grown food. And it just kind of moves those things. So for me, it's been stick to as many natural things as possible. This is same as the nicotine push. Huge things with the nicotine push. I've seen this too.
Yeah.
Synthetically made since 1882. And you find big tobacco, the tiny hats, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and pharma. And you find all the same things with the patches, the gums, all of this. And this is the thing is these things get pushed onto people, the peptides and all of these things that we're talking about. They get pushed onto it because they know they're going to make tons of money. Same like
Mm.
ivermectin and these synthetic dewormers, which cause liver failure, same exact thing. So it's just the algorithm will pump things that are going to make the same companies the same amount of money. When you tell people to use wormwood, which is a natural chelator of metals and things like that, that doesn't get shown. So, I've realized because in order to create synthetic people with synthetic technologies and glasses and everything else and whatever else, they got to eat synthetic foods. Versus if you tell people to just eat raw eggs, they're going to be like, oh, you didn't cook it? What do you mean? I got to just eat the yolk. Oh, I'm supposed to eat the white. It's like,
Mm.
what are we talking about? The chicken gave it to you as a whole egg right here. You just eat that. But because of now this, what you were saying is like breaking it down into pieces, you're not even thinking straight anymore because you don't see the chicken just gave you the egg like this, and whatever. You're
That's
like,
right.
well, if I do the
Gotta throw
biotin and
away
this,
half of it. Yeah.
what? Just eat the egg. Like that's it. Make sure it's from a pasture chicken. So, that's how I've started to look at things. And if we just break it down simply and we just kind of clear the air with it, we just kind of start to understand it. But as for the top foods, superfoods that can go into the body, you can do Shilajit. We just released a new one. It's 88% fulvic acid. It's the highest on the market. I wanted to have the best fulvic acid supplement superfood that you could bring into your body. Fulvic acid's great at detoxing metals, boosting energy. I was showing my videos of me doing clapping push-ups. It's awesome. And it's been used for 5,000 years. I had the medical medium, or the medical Muppet, as I call him, debunking me the other day about Shilajit and saying like
Wow.
nobody should eat this. And it's like, dude, this
Not too
is
long.
5,000 years old. Like
Yeah.
this is since the dawn of time, but whatever.
Yeah.
So, that's one. Pearl powder, really, really cool. We've done things with regenerating eyesight. Most mind-blowing thing is when I read the studies about how you could regenerate your eyes with pearls. And it's
Mhm.
funny because pearls look like your eyes. So there's kind of that whole thing. But I watched the study that talked about this lady was reversing cataracts with pearl powder. And I'm like, wait, what? Because I've never heard that. Eyes cannot regenerate. I've been told the opposite. And they give
Mhm.
you thicker and thicker glasses, which act like crutches. So when we rolled out Pearl, it's just gone absolutely bananas. And people's eyesight has been healing, astigmatisms, glaucoma, and then I had eye professionals coming after me, being like, how dare you say people should use Pearl? And I'm like, what have you done? Like I just look at it like, what have you done to help people's eyes? Because when I went, they just gave me thicker glasses, and then they were like, "Oh, next year, check your insurance and come back."
Mhm.
So what's weird is they've been programmed not to have solutions because it impacts their paycheck. Eye doctors get paid $125,000 a year, so that's why they don't want solutions because that's a
Sure.
big, chunk of change. And then the next one I would say is Dragon's Blood, really great one, phenomenal one, detoxing. It's tree sap. And the tree sap was used to pull the heavy metals out of the body and regenerate the skin. One of the highest antioxidant foods on the earth is dragon's blood, 3 million on the ORAC value. That one, when I learned about skin issues, I was like, dragon's blood's going to do some work. People with chronic eczema, healing dragon's blood. People with bug bites, people with tick bites, people with wounds, people with scars, dragon's blood and coconut oil, healing all that. And the deepest one was, which the dentist didn't like, is you could regenerate your gums with a little bit of dragon's blood and coconut oil on the gums. And that's a
Wow.
big business right there. So, that they don't want that interrupted. And then the last ones I would say for keeping your mind sharp, I would say is lion's mane mushroom, phenomenal one, just to keep the mind very, very sharp. And then when you get into calming the body, I would say reishi. Reishi is considered the mushroom of immortality.
Yeah.
And they talked about how people lived very long because their body was balanced out. It's a great adaptogen, and it's
Mhm.
great before bed to just put you to bed. Because with all this synthetic technology and all this nonsense, like you were just talking about, you can't sleep, right? Can't relax, can't sleep. You're too jacked up, too whatever else. Reishi
Yeah.
can actually be very good. And then if I'm going to add food, because you can always have food,
Of
you can do
course.
raw eggs, you can do raw meat, you can do raw butter, you can do raw dairy. Raw foods, uncooked, is the best to bring into the body. And if you think about it, it's in its perfect natural state and it's meant to go into our body. And then we're like, let's just do all this to it. And then we're like, I can't figure out, why I don't feel that good. So that's the book, The Primal Diet by a Jonas, which I highly recommend everybody check out.
Interesting. What about your book? How long is that going to be before it gets on the shelves?
So we're finishing up the editing and then it should be pretty much good to go. It's taken a long time because it was close to like 800 pages.
Wow.
So yeah, the last section, like I had like it broken down into chapters, and the
Mhm.
last section on the ether and the frequencies and the technology and all of that, that ended up being like 375 pages. So I was
Oh,
like, well, okay,
yeah.
like now I got to like figure all this out. And then I've added a lot to it over time, like learning about radium and radium water and things like this, and
Mhm.
then even putting EMF stuff in there and Wi-Fi and lights and all of these things. It's so and water, so there's a lot in it. And it went from just, when me and you talked about electroculture, it went from just electroculture, putting the copper in the earth, to now this book pretty much covers just about everything. I mean, the references alone there's about a good, I would say, 20 to 30 pages of references,
That's amazing.
including all the books, every website, everything. I mean, I'm pretty much trying to turn it into you can read it and then also have as a stepping stone to lead you to all the other things that you're searching for. So, for
Yeah.
example, if you wanted to learn about hot springs water, there's a website, there's books, there's all the different things that you can find so that you can find these things too. Because I
Mhm.
want it to be a stepping stone into these topics that me and you have talked about today. But then on top of that, it also leads you down those paths because that's what my journey's been, where I found one book and then I went to the next and the next and the next. But now you'll be able to have like a path to it, which makes it a little easier because now, since me and you have last talked, the censorship and YouTube, I mean, I was wiped from YouTube and everything else. But all of these platforms, I mean, I'm like non-existent on Google. You know, you type anything in, it comes up with like two videos. And it's
Yeah.
like, I think I've done more than two videos and whatever else. But that's the thing. The information has become harder to find. So I was working on making the reference pages the best that I could have so that people can have all the books, they can find them, they can get the PDFs, they can get the tangible things. And then
Mm.
that then accelerates what we're trying to talk about moving forward rather than just keeping us as like, this is one topic. No, this goes into all because it gives you now the ability to take back your freedom, in my opinion, with food, water, and energy. And then, yeah, nobody's stopping that.
That's awesome. That sounds amazing. It's one of those things too. Like we've had several of these conversations, and honestly, we could probably pick one topic and just go balls deep on that, and it would be an entire podcast in itself. But I mean, anyone that's going to be listening to this, and my audience is similar to yours, like they're very curious people, and they want to know a lot about a lot, and so we end up sort of going on these weird and wonderful tangents. But yeah, that book sounds amazing. It sounds like you never have to buy another book, to be honest with you, once you get through it. So
That's
sounds
kind of where I was going with it. It's very multidimensional because I
mm,
feel like a lot of the times when I would get a book, there would be some stuff in there that would lead me to one. But I
mm,
feel like there was only a couple that I can name like off the top of my head, like Lost Science, Jerry Vasitilos. That
mhm,
book was phenomenal. Like when you get into the hidden technologies and all these things, I mean, he covers so many different people and he
mm.
explains it from so many different angles. And I thought that's how all books should be, you know, because usually you just get one topic and it's like, well, aren't there other things that it could lead to? And are there other people who wrote on this? So that's why I was big on the resources because I want to have people be able to find the resources too, because I want them to collect the books. I want them to learn. And that's what I'm all about. I mean, that's what it's been since I've been censored, blocked, and deleted and everything else, and my internet shut off and everything. I want people to have the information because you can make a change for you, your family, and other people, and it doesn't have to be much. You know, even putting a simple electroculture antenna, it doesn't have to be much. And if each person does that, then think of the change. And here we are today. We all survived the pandemic and the nonsense and them shutting things down and whatever else. But now look at where everybody came out on the other side, right? Now, when they did the whole, the Santa virus nonsense like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, people are making memes and making fun of it and whatever else.
100%.
It
Yeah.
doesn't do it. So,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I see that that's how far we came because before when they used to talk that stuff, people were like, but now it's like, no, no, it's
Yeah.
not going to happen. So that makes me happy because humanity has, seen through the nonsense of the lies
Yeah.
that they're going to get, caught up by some virus and whatever else.
Yeah, agreed. It's definitely makes me happy too. I mean, I'm still somewhat traumatized and hyper vigilant around, like what's next. But at the same time, it does give me hope, and hope does go a long way. Like it's certainly encouraging to see a lot of people. And yeah, you should take your hat off to yourself, like in terms of what you've done to influence a lot of that. I mean, you're right. When we talked a few years ago, I mean, a lot of this was kind of like really, in a sense, pushing boundaries as to what people were shaping their thoughts around, and now like it seems like I'm talking about it every day with just everyday people, which is yeah, it's really good. Anyway, man, I won't keep you too much longer. I'll let you go and have a shower and cool yourself off.
Yeah, I'm, I'm pretty toasty, but the nice part about the heat, and that's why I love it, is it just gives you so much energy. So it's like, I definitely believe we're meant to be in it. But yes, I am a little sweating a little buckets, but I'm all good, so it's all
You're good,
good.
man. All the links and everything to all your work will be in the show notes, so everyone can go and have a look at what you're doing. I highly recommend that they do. I just want to tell you, like for me to you, like I just think that you're a real down to earth, great guy, and you can clearly see that your intention is to help and not to deceive or not to swindle anyone out of their hard-earned money. And I just think you're doing a wonderful job. So thank you, man. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, brother. And it's funny, we connected during the pandemic when all the nonsense was happening. And then
Yep.
now we're here today. But yeah, I just want the information to be able to be out there. And any type of solution I found, I've tried to put it out there. And that's why even getting attacked with like the radium water. I had this guy, if you want to laugh, he put up this video and he's like, this guy's an idiot, about like that. He's talking about radium water. Well,
Mhm.
this guy has 65 of these that I bought one of, that I was drinking out of because I was showing like how it's safe. He has 65 in his house. So I'm like, aren't you worried about the radiation that you now are telling me is so dangerous? But you have 65 of them in the back of your room, like, because you're a collector, and
Wow.
then he said it was harmless. So I'm like, so is it harmless or harmful? So it's just
Yeah.
funny because, like you said, there are people who are installed, I've realized, like in this, and then that will be put out there. But the cool news is once you break the spell, right? Like they get shared and people learn and people understand and people are like, you know what? Actually, my grandma used to drink radium water and then bathe in hot springs and she felt great. So then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it's like, boop. And I feel like that's the coolest part of all this is that just a little tidbit of information of doing the
Mm.
opposite or just going against the grain can actually break all of that so fast. So that's just
Yeah.
my rant on it. But yeah,
You're a good man. Um, I can't wait to speak again, man. I wish you well. Have a great day, rest of your day. And yeah, man, we'll circle back. I'm sure sometime soon, and we'll see what else you're up to. Okay.
cool. You have a great rest of your day, brother. I'll talk to you.
See you later.